World Regions Geography 110, East Asia, Part 5. So we're dealing with cultural practices, social differences, and identity. Some of you may be familiar with the Cultural Revolution. The Cultural Revolution was in the late 60s, and basically it was the conflict between the urban and the rural. Mao recognized the importance historically of the rural in China, and revolutions have always emerged from the rural, not from the urban. And Mao recognized this, and the Cultural Revolution basically, Mao felt that the Chinese were becoming too urbanized, too modern, too cultural, for lack of a better word, and wanted to make sure that Chinese understood their heritage and the basis of the revolution. So he unleashed the Red Guards, which were fanatical young communists from rural communities, mostly uneducated, and they went literally into the cities, into the universities, rounded up city people and university students, took them out into the country and made them work in the rice paddies, in the rural areas, out of their comfort zone in the cities, and put them out in the rural areas. And I personally knew a person who had gone through that and had been in the middle of her PhD, and all of a sudden spent 3 years working out in a rice paddy 12 hours a day. For her, it was a very traumatic and very bad situation. She was in the university in Beijing. But anyway, when Mao died in 1976, the Cultural Revolution ended, and you began to see a movement towards a more modern Chinese Communist Party, a gradual movement towards a more capitalist, a less hardline society that we now see in China. So you have this reemergence of Chinese culture after Mao's death in 1976. And these issues of Chinese rituals were allowed again, Taoist teachings, many of the cultural things we take for granted in China were again promoted and allowed to grow and flourish. And it's a dramatic improvement in China. But it's also been the emergence of capitalism, and I think, that's still to be seen whether that's good for China or not. Now, gender and gender issues. Asian cultures typically have highly hierarchical systems of gender roles. They are male dominated, which manifest themselves in all societies in East Asia. Typically in China, there was is definitely male dominated, but if you were poor, you actually had less constraints than wealthier women. And the wealthier women, the wealthier Chinese, the elites developed things like feet binding, high heel shoes, lots of makeup, tight dresses, those sorts of things that you didn't see in the West and you didn't see in rural China. China's one-child policy came out of trying to control population. This policy is important because when you've had some natural disasters such as earthquakes, where schools collapsed and a lot of children died, with a one-child policy, those people cannot have other children. Sometimes they're too old, sometimes they're just not allowed. But the one-child policy only applied to people living in urban areas, not to rural families. So you consequently have a big difference in urban and rural. One of the conflicts, and if you're poor in China, you're in a rural area, and if you're wealthy, you live probably in an urban area. Female infanticide, either killing or disposing of female children because of this right here, male dominated. Families wanted a male child, and so they would kill female children in order, and say they died so that they could still have another child and try for a male. It's ended up with a lopsided male-female ratio, which the long-term results of that are yet to be seen, but typically everywhere else in the globe you have a lot more males than you do females, a couple 3% more males. In China, it is much more lopsided, and that difference, China has for a long time said, oh, it's just the way it worked out, but I believe it's probably the female infanticide. Ethnicity and ethnic conflict in China. Like I said earlier, that a lot of people in the West and the U.S. Look at Chinese, we say, oh, these are Chinese. We see them all as Chinese. They see themselves as very ethnically diverse. And depending on where you're at, if you're outside the main group, which is the Han Chinese, which makes up about 91% of the country, if you're outside that, you are disadvantaged. So there's a lot of ethnic tension, and it's more severe on the fringes, in other words, on the edges of the country. So regions like Tibet, there is the ethnic Tibet people see themselves very different than Chinese. They see themselves culturally different, and that causes a lot of conflict. Muslim regions in the western part of China, if you travel out the Silk Road to Central Asia, they see themselves very different. There has been a lot of ethnic conflict, and one of the issues China is facing, just like the rest of the world, is Muslim extremism, and this arises out of ethnic conflict going on in Western China. Fringe regions in the southwest, which is that region down along like Vietnamese border. There's a lot of ethnic minorities in that region. It's a mountainous region. There's Min, there's Miao, there's Hmong. There's lots of ethnic minorities in there that are discriminated against, have less opportunities, and have conflict with the main Chinese government. And in the northern region, in Manchuria and along Mongolia, there's a lot of ethnic minorities that are also discriminated against and given fewer opportunities. This is a demography and urbanization. So what you're seeing here, if you look at Asia, this is Southeast Asia, the darker the color, the more people. So you see this concentration right here. This is also the area that if global warming takes over, you will see these people displaced, because if the seas rise about 3 feet, large parts of this area along here will all flood and disappear. You see here Tokyo, Kyoto, these regions here, you see dense population. You see some population concentration up in this region, but not nearly as dense as you have right in here. This is Mongolia here, very sparsely populated. Western China, very sparsely populated. Most of the population is down in this continental area here. This is the Tibetan Plain, and this is the Central Highlands. There are a few population centers out here. These people ethnically are like the Mongols, Uyghurs, and Kazakhs, and tend to be Muslim religion. These are areas of conflict for China. You're seeing a demographic change. What you're looking here, and this is Japan. You look at their demographic. You see here, boom, a little population there. This is post-World War II boom. Then almost immediately, you see this drop in population. And this is the second boom. That's these people having children. But then since then, you see a much smaller, and so what you're going to end up with is, as this population moves up here, you have fewer and fewer people. Japan's population by 2050 will probably be substantially less, maybe as much as 20% less than it is today. China, you see this steady increase. Again, this is post-World War II, post-revolution. You see a little different distribution than you do in Japan. It didn't really boom until the 60s, and then that's the one-child policy goes in. You have the secondary boom again right there, and then it's quite a bit smaller. As it began to modernize and westernize, you see this much smaller population. China's population will probably decrease by 2050 also, so it'll actually have a smaller population, or virtually the same population as it has now. Now, recently there's been some relaxation of the one-child policy, and that's had may have an impact on China. We don't really know yet. Mongolia, a more rural area, much less of a dramatic there. You see this is the population boom. What largely kept the population down here was economics, political unrest. Now you're seeing this generation having their children, but the population here much smaller in the higher numbers because of livelihood. What you see up in here is a result of World War II. Vast numbers of Japanese troops. You have many more females than males. China, not so much. I don't know what the distribution. These look fairly evenly distributed, but I think you see, yeah, see it's here you're out to 5, and here you're barely over 4, and that's a substantial difference, which means there's a lot less opportunity for males to find females for partners. If you look here, a more normal distribution of male and female. And the same in Japan, you see them virtually even, and you have to really look at it to see the differences, but you know, it's quite a bit of difference.